a long time ago.
Nice. So what was your what was your childhood like there?
Well, the town that I grew up in, Pomona, basically had two communities. One was English-speaking, white community. The other one was Mexican. My parents came from Mexico, so I grew up speaking nothing but Spanish. And it was okay when I was with my community, with my family and friends, but when I went into school, it was a little troublesome because I didn't know English that well, and so that created some problems. But in that school that I went to, we had classes for Mexican kids and we had classes for everyone else. So that made it even harder. So, my parents, very loving, very generous people, so I never felt out of whack.
Mm-hmm. So, how did that shape you into who you are today?
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you, some of the experiences that I remember were very, very important. I remember wondering why we could only sit in the balcony of the movie theaters. And I remember that we could only swim in the public swimming pool on Thursday afternoons, because at night that's when they changed the water, but we couldn't use it until the next week. I remember in school wondering why I could never go to class with some of my friends that I made in the neighborhood, because they were white and I was not. I remember being made to go to, what is it when you have difficulty with language speaking? Because I had an accent. Although I could speak English well, I had an accent, therefore I had an impediment, they call it, so I had to go to special classes. I remember my mother being treated very badly by business people. That had one incident. She was called a lazy wetback, and she's never been lazy. I remember my father, a very intelligent man, could only work picking oranges. Even in the citrus industry, he couldn't work in the warehouse because Mexicans were not allowed. All those were very critical in making me realize, whoa, there's something wrong. It wasn't until years later that I came to understand what was going on.
So, like, what's your selection process?
Pardon?
What's your selection process? Like, do you just find people off the street, or?
Explain that. I don't understand what you mean by selection process.
Like, you find kids and then you help them become better people, and like.
I think I understand what you're saying. I think over the years, as I've worked with people, I came to understand that there are a lot of people still without rights, or with limited rights, and sometimes those rights are broken. And if there's a selection process, it's that I and people that I work with over the years have seen many communities that suffer all sorts of injustices, and I tend to choose to work in those communities. To give you an example, Roosevelt High is one of the schools in town that over the years has not received a lot of resource. Well, I know a lot of friends of mine who worked hard over the years to help Roosevelt become what it's becoming. So we look to those communities. With me, it was first the Spanish-speaking community, the immigrants. I think you know them by illegal immigrants. then as I grew older, I realized that it was a question of race, that different races were not always acknowledged or accepted in our society. So I started gravitating to those communities, African American, Asian American, Native American, the various diversities around our community. So I think that's, if you're talking about how I choose to be with folk, those are the folk I choose to be with. And I have worked with young people many years over my life. And it was with the idea of not making them better, because I don't know what that may mean, you know, everyone determines what's better for them, but providing them information, resources, so that they're able to make appropriate decisions and choose the directions that they're going.
So, what attracted you to the United Church of Christ?
Oh, how did you know about that?
We read some articles about you.
All right, do you know what the United Church of Christ is?
A little bit.
It's a weird denomination, you know. It's Christian, but it comes from the Pilgrims, people that stepped on that rock. What was the name of that rock?
Plymouth Rock.
Hey, very good history. Plymouth Rock. They came from basically England, although there's some others from other places, looking for religious freedom. And almost from that beginning, the church, which Congregational one time was now United Church of Christ, has been attracted, or its selection process has been towards justice. They were the ones who helped initiate the abolitionist movement. Do you remember what that is? To free the slaves. They're the ones who looked at women. In fact, they ordained the first woman minister in 1853. At that time, probably the first woman ever ordained in the world. They continued to fight against slavery going into the late 1800s. Then in the 1900s, they looked at labor laws. They were very supportive of equity for workers. They were very supportive of unions. And throughout the years, they kept being very justice-oriented. We're very much peace-oriented. We seek peace, not war. We're very much, what can I tell you? During the Civil Rights Movement, we supported the education. At one time, there was an understanding that you have equal schools for equal people, but you separated them. Well, we didn't think that was just. Our church always selects the ones who seems to be the worst treated. So that we're the first denomination that ordained gay and lesbians, transgendered, bisexual people. We have a saying that all people are welcome, no matter who they are, no matter what they are, no matter what they've done. All people are welcome without judgment. And it's pretty hard to resist that, particularly if you're involved in justice, because that's the kind of church you hope it would be. So my home church now, Ainsworth United Church of Christ, which is right down the street on Ainsworth, is a multiracial, multicultural church. It's open and affirming. Open and affirming means that gays, bisexuals, transgendered people are all welcome to be with us and to just share a common life. And it's a very exciting place. It's very diverse, a lot of young people, and that definitely attracted me to the United Church of Christ and continues to.
So, what did you study to become a doctor?
Well, let me tell you this. I don't know where they got that doctor because I don't use it. I went to the University of California, Golden Bears. They never win anything, but I still hurt every time they lose. I went to seminary in Berkeley, Pacific School of Religion, to become a minister. That's where I was trained in the United Church of Christ. And then I worked for many years in Northern California, basically in issues of racial justice. Real early on, we're talking 1950s and 60s, I was engaged working with other friends from other communities in racial justice. I worked particularly with Latinos and with African Americans in trying to reach out to churches, to schools, to universities, to communities, to police departments on the issues of race, which is a very critical area of need in our country, if not the world. Those were the areas that I worked with. And when I lived in Berkeley for many years, I was the administrative director of the Center for Urban Black Studies, which is pretty awesome. Here's a Chicano. You know what a Chicano is? Here's a Chicano working with a whole bunch of African Americans. And somehow we learned how to work together. I helped form the Alamo Black and Brown clergy in Northern California, which consisted of African American pastors and Latinos. I worked nationally with the African American community. I worked with Native American community. Do you remember the AIM, American Indian Movement?
Yeah.
We called a gathering of Native Americans, African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, and white Americans to a gathering in Kansas City in which over 400 people showed up to discuss how we can work together. Because at that time, everybody was doing their own thing. And everybody was jealous of the other group. Most of us were jealous of the African Americans because they seemed to get the most attention. And some of us started saying, you know, it doesn't make any sense if we fight against each other. That's not doing anybody any good. Let's come together and try to build coalitions. Let's see if working together we can gain more for all of us. And that was the start of my involvement in a multiracial way. If you were to ask me what community do I work with now and over the last maybe 30 years, it's with a multiracial, multi-ethnic community, which means I work with as many different communities as I possibly can.
So, why do you think it was important to set up a scholarship fund?
Oh, you also know about that. That I had nothing to do with, okay? This was a group of folk from the United Church of Christ that decided, number one, we have a scholarship for African Americans, which is great because this is to become ministers, because that's very much needed. We have a scholarship fund for gay, lesbian people, transgendered people. That's very needed. But there was not one for Latino pastors. So these fine group of people, friends and colleagues of mine, at my retirement, I retired in 2005 here in Portland, they presented this reality on my behalf, trying to honor me, which is sort of humbling. You know, I'm too young to be honored by anybody. You know, maybe after I die, people can do what they want. But anyway, they did that. And there is a great need because our church is very, very unique. I mean, I don't know if you know much about churches, but some churches find it very difficult to do the kind of things we do. But we feel that's what our task is, that's what our ministry is. And sometimes Latinos coming from other backgrounds find it really hard to be part of the United Church of Christ, so they tend to take their church people in a different direction. And what we want to do is to invite them to be fully United Church of Christ, to be fully committed to justice, to be fully committed to all the values that we feel that we've been called to do. So they set this scholarship fund up, naming it Hector Lopez, right? That's the only connection I have to it. And it's really a wonderful opportunity. When I retired, they asked me, what do you want us to do when you retire? You know, usually a big banquet. You know, people come up and, Hector was great and all that jazz. And I said, I'd like to convene